At some point, for some reason, Caleb Williams was held to a different standard than Bryce Young. It started when Bryce Young went first, CJ Stroud went second. In the same draft, the two different teams. Bryce Young and the Panthers had no success to a horrendously mismanaged franchise with terrible coaching. Terrible situation for Bryce Young. He goes in, doesn't play well, team doesn't do well. And then the second overall pick in CJ Stroud, instant success, goes to the postseason, both in their first year. Bryce Young, washed, bust. CJ Stroud, second coming. And immediately Bryce Young was just discredited. Everything he ever accomplished, discredited. He stinks. Washed, bad player, bad decision maker. Even though he won the Heisman and went to a national championship game. Then literally the next year, Caleb Williams goes 1, Jaden Daniels goes 2. It's almost this identical situation. One guy goes first overall to a mismanaged organization that claimed to be improving around their first overall quarterback and never addressed the real issues. Meanwhile, the second overall quarterback goes to a semi-dysfunctional franchise that's scuffled, but also has had success in the past and just needed that dynamic, athletic quarterback to really advance them to the next level. With, by the way, a new head coach that's competent and capable with Dan Quinn in Washington and DeMeco Ryans in Houston, and it's instant success for that quarterback. Jaden Daniels, instant success in Washington. CJ Stroud, instant success in Houston. Both went number 2 overall. Caleb Williams goes to Chicago, number 1 overall. Bryce Young goes to Carolina, number 1 overall. But somehow, some way, during this process, Caleb Williams was held to a different standard than Bryce Young. With Caleb Williams and the Bears being brutal. I know they have 4 wins, but they're terrible. Anyone with the brain and eyes can see. They are horrendous. There is nothing there on the offensive side of the ball for Chicago. But Caleb's not held to the same standard as Bryce Young. He's not. It's unfair to Bryce Young. It's hypocritical to everybody who discredited Bryce Young and continues to discredit him. Somehow it's not Caleb's fault. Somehow in Chicago, it's head coaching, it's ownership, it's pass protection, it's play calling. But down in Carolina, Bryce Young's washed. Bryce Young's terrible. Bryce Young is already a bust. He's getting benched 2 weeks into his sophomore season. But for Caleb Williams, it's, oh, no, he was the first pick. He's a dynamic athlete. He's a Heisman Trophy winner. He's a first overall pick, but he's not the problem. We know he's good. It's the team around him. Wait, but didn't Bryce Young win a Heisman Trophy in college and played at Alabama in one of the most prestigious programs of all time and put up insane numbers? No, it's different. Bryce Young went to Carolina, probably the most dysfunctional franchise in the NFL. And then that CJ Stroud went to Houston and he went to the playoffs. So Bryce Young's a bust. CJ Stroud is an MVP candidate. This year, it's, Jaden Daniels is really good. The Commanders are better with him. In Chicago, it's not Caleb Williams' fault. Okay, which one is it then? Which one is it? I've heard more criticism about Caleb as the Bears have gotten worse this year, but it's nowhere near the same level that people are judging Bryce Young at. It's nowhere near the same. And it's unfair to Bryce Young. Or it's fair treatment for Bryce Young, and you can say he's a bust all you want, but I need the same energy for Caleb. You have to pick a side when you're judging these first overall quarterbacks. Figure out which one is the right take. Figure out which one is the proper way. Keep that same energy when you judge Caleb and Bryce Young. Keep that same energy when you talk about number 1 overall pick quarterbacks. Because with Bryce Young, he's a bust. He's washed. He's done. He's benched 2 games into his sophomore year. But in Chicago, no, that's not Caleb's fault. No, the team sucks. No, the coach is terrible. No, it's a mismanaged organization. All of those things are true in Carolina too. So keep the same energy for both guys. Don't be a hypocrite. Which one is it? It has to be one or the other. It's either Bryce Young is terrible, he's a bust, he's not a great quarterback, and that's true. But that also needs to be true for Caleb Williams. He's a bust, he was probably picked too high, and he's not the solution to all the organizational issues. Okay, that's fine if both of those are true. Or it's both organizations are horrendously mismanaged, and no matter who they took at quarterback with the number 1 overall pick, they weren't going to be good. They weren't going to be good instantly. And CJ Stroud and Jaden Daniels are the anomalies. It's not Bryce Young's fault. It's not Caleb Williams' fault. Both the organizations are terrible, but you have to pick one. It's either the organization and the quarterbacks need to be given a little bit of a break because the teams are an absolute joke, which is what I stand on. Or you have to call Bryce Young a bust and you have to call Caleb Williams a bust. It's either both or it's neither. You have to pick a side on this argument. But you can't discredit Bryce Young and say he's washed and deserved to be benched and he's a bust. And meanwhile, in Chicago, give Caleb all the benefits and all the breaks and say, well, that team's just mismanaged. He has no time to throw and the Bears are terrible. No, it's got to pick a side. You have to pick a side. Otherwise, you don't know ball. And I think the correct side is that both organizations are horrendously mismanaged. The organizational approach from the Bears and everything I've heard from Bears fans is the ownership is terrible, the general manager and the moves they make have not been good, and the head coaching situation and the play calling is a disaster. Disaster. That's what I've heard in Chicago. Newsflash, every single one of those things applied to the Panthers in Bryce Young's first season. In fact, Bryce Young had his coach fired halfway through his first season. Oh yeah, that'll be fun. That's indicative of success. Like, give me a break, dude. I think both organizations are horrendously mismanaged in Carolina and Chicago. So to put almost any blame on Bryce Young in Carolina or even Caleb in Chicago, it's pretty unfair. And you don't know ball if you're just going to blame quarterbacks. Bears fans coming out, Caleb Williams sucks. This dude's washed. Dude, he's getting roasted. Every time he drops back to throw, he's getting destroyed. He has no time to throw. Nobody is open. Nobody's open because the play calling's terrible. The pass protection and the coaching of those pass protectors is horrendous. And the same thing can be said in Carolina. It is neither of these guys' fault. Both Caleb and Bryce Young won Heisman trophies in college football. They were both respectively best players in all of college football. But then they go to the NFL and they don't have instant success. But one guy gets treated like it's his fault and the other guy in Chicago gets told, well, the team sucks and it's a mismanaged organization. I need the same energy for Bryce Young that we're getting now with Caleb Williams. That's what I'm asking for. Bryce Young's a bust. He's washed. Carolina stinks. Look at his decision making. Plus, Bryce went 1, Stroud went 2, and Stroud's so much better. So Bryce is washed. No, this year it's different. Jaden Daniels was really good in Washington, and he was a number 2 pick behind Caleb Williams. But Caleb in Chicago, terrible supporting cast, terrible coach, mismanaged organization. Why? Why is Caleb getting the benefit of the doubt? Bryce Young is getting thrown to the wolves. You have to pick a side on that. It's either the quarterback's fault for the team not being good, or the organization did not do enough around that quarterback to lead them to success. A quarterback literally cannot do everything by himself. He just can't, especially when they're medium to undersized, like Caleb and like Bryce Young. When you're medium to undersized, you need to be protected in the pocket. And you need to have receivers to feed the ball to, receivers that are pretty open, weapons on the offensive side of the ball. Bears kind of have some weapons, but let's be honest, it's an okay DJ Moore, and it's a back end of his career Keenan Allen. And then what? A DeAndre Swift that was discarded by previous teams and no protection, no time. But we see Jaden Daniels and CJ Stroud and go, oh yeah, quarterbacks can fix organizational issues. Newsflash, the Commanders weren't that mismanaged. Dan Quinn's actually a really good coach, and Jaden Daniels is protected. And by the way, he's bigger and taller and more effective and can see and scrambles. And Bryce Young and Caleb Williams can't scramble. Like they drop back. As soon as their right foot gets put in the ground on their 5-step drop, there's guys in their face every single time. Stop blaming the quarterbacks. Stop blaming the young quarterback. They went first overall for a reason. It's not their fault. It's the organization's fault for having garbage around them. Garbage.